Despite the coronavirus, spring has come to our land. So it's absolutely perfect to offer you today a story with the title April in Paris. My name is Mark, and I am the author of all works presented on Dramas, Dreams, and Drollery. I hope this tale will dispel some of the anxiety you may be experiencing from the current crisis. I remind you that my programs are offered exclusively for your enjoyment and that I retain copyright to them. For many people, even those who have never traveled to the French capital, the words April in Paris evoke images of twittering bluebirds, artists at work along the Seine, and the thrill of romance. That was the picture in the minds of the protagonists of the following story before their first trip abroad. But life has a way of imposing its own will. As you will see, a big city can differ substantially from the stereotype. Here is April in Paris. It was April of 1985, and the Emersons were in Paris. A decade earlier, while studying at the University of Georgia, Ted and Carol had dreamed of going to France for their honeymoon. But with only $800 in their wallets, they had settled for Disney World. Now, Ted was assistant manager of the Fidelity Bank in Macon, and they were taking their first trip abroad. Accompanied by 6-year-old Wendy, the couple couldn't pretend it was a second honeymoon. Nevertheless, the experience seemed like a fairy tale come true. The plan called for packing a month's activities into 1 week. Since arriving 2 days ago, they had already visited the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, the Tuileries, and the Notre Dame Cathedral. Carol had even squeezed in a stroll down the Rue Rivoli to gaze at the latest fashions in the windows of chic boutiques. And they had moved about the city rather efficiently, considering that Ted spoke only English and Carol had forgotten most of the French she had learned in college. This Wednesday morning had been devoted to churches and museums on the left bank. The whirlwind tour had given Ted a headache. At midday, the Emersons opted for lunch at the outdoor cafe of their charming hotel on the Boulevard Saint-Germain. While they were enjoying bouillabaisse in warm weather, a very attractive brunette in a svelte black dress sat down at the table next to theirs. Seeing Ted, the woman gave a smile of recognition. When Ted responded similarly, Carol asked who she was. "Remember the flowers I bought you yesterday? Well, that woman was in the florist shop. We talked about roses. Would you mind if I invited her to sit with us?" "No, that's fine." Joining them, the invitee introduced herself as a businesswoman named Madeleine Dupré. With manicured hands, exquisite coiffure, delicate earrings and bracelets, and impeccable makeup, the woman seemed more prepared for a film shoot than a business deal. "It surprises me," said Ted, "that you are in commerce. I thought you were probably a fashion model." Mademoiselle Dupré laughed. "Do you work for a company?" inquired Carol. "No, I'm what you would call an independent consultant. I work with many people in many organizations." Reading the face of his guest, Ted formed the impression that she didn't wish to discuss her work, so they turned the talk in a different direction. "Did you buy some roses at that florist shop? You appear to have strong interest in them." "No, actually, I had other business there." Before the Emersons could say another word about the florist shop, Mademoiselle Dupré began to recommend sites of interest in Paris. As she talked, Ted noticed a tall man in a brown beret with a scar on his cheek. Sitting at the table just behind the French woman, he seemed to be observing her intently. Ted assumed that he was captivated by her beauty. Thoughts about the man in the beret evaporated when Wendy began to fidget. Assuming his role as a parent, Ted tried to distract the child. With his fingers, he did the tricks that always amused the little one. This duty diverted him from the conversation with the women. His exclusion persisted when Carol tried to mix French into the talk. Now the throbbing pain of his head fully occupied the suffering man. Rubbing his temples and neck brought only minor relief. As the luncheon drew to a close, Ted made a request of his wife. "This headache is killing me. I know that you and Wendy want to do some shopping. Is it okay if I take a nap while you're doing that? With a little rest, I'll be in much better shape for the concert tonight." Carol consented. Ted called the waiter to the table and told him to charge the entire bill, including Mademoiselle Dupre's, to room 414. The Frenchwoman expressed her gratitude for the lunch and her pleasure at having met this fine American family. As their guest departed, Ted saw the man in the beret rise from his table and follow her. What's he up to, the American thought. But the headache soon overwhelmed his curiosity. He went straight to the hotel room. Within half an hour, he was asleep. About 2 hours later, the ailing man was awakened by the ring of the telephone beside his bed. A masculine voice spoke English with a thick French accent. "Mr. Emerson, I have kidnapped your wife and child. If you wish to see them alive again, follow my instructions carefully. Go at once by taxi to the suburb of Neuilly. Tell the driver to let you off at the Protestant Temple. A half block from there, you will find an apartment building on Rue Perrouet, number 7. Go up to room 210 and enter it. You will find the door unlocked. Do not contact the police, the American consulate, or anyone else. If you do not arrive alone within 1 hour, I will kill your family." Ted tried to respond, but the caller said simply, "Neuilly, Rue Perrouet, number 7, room 210, and hung up. It took little time for the distraught husband and father to decide that he had to comply immediately. Dressing hurriedly, he rushed downstairs and managed to summon a taxi. However, the driver, an elderly man who was hard of hearing, could not comprehend instructions excitedly rendered in butchered French. Perhaps 10 minutes elapsed before the chauffeur understood his destination. The vehicle reached the Protestant Temple at 4:45, only 10 minutes before the deadline. Locating Rue Perrouet, number 7, proved to be a simple task. It was a gray stone building at least a century old with a mansard roof. With trepidation, Ted mounted the steps to the second floor. Outside room 210, he hesitated for just a moment, wondering what to expect. Taking a deep breath, he entered. From behind the door, someone grabbed him and put a cloth over his face. The American struggled briefly, but soon succumbed to chloroform. Upon awakening, the victim found himself lying on the wooden floor of a spacious bedroom. It had a high ceiling and light fuchsia-colored walls. He was in underwear, and a revolver was in his right hand. Ted dropped the weapon and looked at his watch. It was 6:20. He stood up slowly and shakily, and then he saw her. In the bed next to which he stood was Madeleine Dupre. She appeared to be dead. Pulling back the blanket that covered her, Ted saw blood over much of her nude body. At that instant, the apartment door burst open, and into the bedroom rushed several policemen with drawn guns. Screaming commands in French, they forced Ted to the floor. Within minutes, he was on his way in handcuffs to the prefecture of police. At the station, the American was taken to the office of Inspector Michel Lanvin, a 55-year-old man with a portly build, bulging eyes, a protruding jaw, and a shoelace-thin mustache. With 30 years of experience in law enforcement and the ability to speak English, he was the perfect official to deal with a murder case involving an American suspect. Never having committed a crime in his life, even a parking violation, Ted felt very apprehensive in this environment. He didn't know what to expect. From watching crime dramas, he assumed that the inspector would begin by reading him his rights. So he was surprised when the lawman took a different course and initiated conversation directly about the murder. Excuse me, but I'd like to consult an attorney in the American consulate before I answer any questions. Monsieur, you must understand that you are in France. This is not the American system of justice. Here we do things differently. In time, you will be given the opportunity to procure an attorney and to contact your consulate. But for now, you must cooperate in an interrogation, after which you will sign a statement. Then you may consult anyone you wish. Perhaps I should inform you that under French law, a person accused of a crime is considered guilty until he proves himself innocent. In this instance, the crime is homicide, and we have considerable evidence of your guilt. Unless you can provide exonerating information or we uncover new evidence, you will soon face the guillotine. With this preface, the interrogation commenced. Shocked by Lanvin's statement and frightened at the prospect of execution, Ted floundered in the early stages. In the end, he emphatically denied having killed Mademoiselle Dupré, owning the weapon, or having any motive whatsoever to commit the crime. Despite the telephone caller's warning not to inform the police, he felt compelled to reveal the kidnapping of his family and the demands of the kidnapper. His monologue ended with a poignant appeal to the police to rescue his family. The recent events bewildered the accused. In his jail cell, Ted struggled to make sense of the bizarre affair. He could not foresee that circumstances would soon create a landscape even more surreal. About 3 hours after his arrest, a guard escorted the prisoner once more to the office of Inspector Lanvin. To his utter delight, Ted found Carol and Wendy there. But joy gave way to perplexity when his family denied having been kidnapped. According to Carol, after shopping, she and the child had returned to the hotel to find him missing. Through a call to the police, they had managed to learn his whereabouts. To Carol, Inspector Lanvin summarized the case against her husband. An anonymous caller had summoned police to Rue Perouet, number 7 in Neuilly. There, gendarmes had found Theodore Emerson in his underwear beside the dead body of Madeleine Dupré, a beautiful woman whom he admitted having seen on at least 2 occasions. The murder weapon discovered at the scene of the crime bore his fingerprints, and the defense of the accused rested upon an alleged kidnapping of his family that his own wife denied. The situation looked very grim. The inspector closed his summary with some advice. Madame, I strongly urge you to find the very best lawyer. Professional ethics forbids me from recommending anyone, but perhaps your consulate will. Without clever assistance, your husband will surely die. Carol had to search deep in her heart to know where she stood in this affair. Madeleine Dupré was a striking beauty. Unquestionably, she and her husband had met once in a florist's shop. Could Ted have been so smitten in that one encounter that he had thrown reason and their marriage out the window? Carol decided that the answer was no. That wasn't Ted. She would trust her man. By Thursday evening, Inspector Lanvin was not all sure of his airtight case. The murder weapon was unregistered. Though manufactured in America, that fact did not necessarily point to the accused. French criminals often used American weapons. Other facts were highly disturbing. The fingerprints on the gun were of Emerson's right hand, but he was left-handed, and there were no traces of powder on the accused. Most troublesome of all was the motive. This foreigner had been away from his native land only 2 days, and the trip was his first journey abroad. If Emerson was guilty, it must have been a crime of passion. Mademoiselle Dupré was a beautiful woman, but unfamiliar with Paris and the French language, how could this man have lured her to an obscure hotel in Neuilly? Did he force her at gunpoint? The autopsy indicated no semen in the woman. So was denial of sex the motive? No, it didn't make sense. To further complicate matters, why did the deceased have a plane ticket to America? And what had become of her Latin American boyfriend? Lanvin found the whole case perplexing. While the inspector was enduring the strain of uncertainty, Carol was displaying resolve. Thursday morning, after leaving Wendy in the care of the hotel concierge, she visited her husband in jail. For the occasion, she dressed in the new blue dress she had purchased the previous day. She devoted more time than usual to arrange her hair over the ears she regarded as her greatest defect, and to apply makeup especially over the slight blemish on her left cheek. She knew it was irrational, but Carol couldn't help thinking that in Ted's mind she was competing for attention with Mademoiselle Dupré. At the station, the woman was distressed to find her husband in a sullen mood. Though never particularly athletic or physically imposing, he seemed on this occasion to be a shriveled facsimile of his usual self. His arms hung inertly at his sides as though incapable of action. His chin rested low on his chest. Carol caressed his cheek and kissed his forehead. Ted seemed oblivious to her action. Despite all the attention she had given to her appearance, the efforts were for naught. She might as well have dressed in pajamas. Honey, don't let things get you down. We'll find a way out of this. Look at me, Ted. There, that's better. Wendy's in good care with the concierge of the hotel. You don't have to worry about her. If you're concerned about me, I want you to know that I fully believe your story. I know you didn't kill that woman. As for you, I've been thinking about how to proceed. With your permission, I'm going to the American consulate today and try to get a recommendation for an attorney, just as Inspector Lanvin suggested. Tomorrow, I want to send Wendy home to my mother. This affair could last for some time. Having Wendy here would be bad for her, and it would restrict our actions. Whatever you say. Don't talk in that dejected way. Stay alert. Your case is not hopeless. Let's use our heads. A little clear thinking might make all the difference. Okay, I'll try. Let's review the facts of the case. Maybe there's something we overlooked. Start by picturing in your mind the encounters you had with the murdered woman. I only saw her once, but perhaps I'll remember something significant. Ted suddenly sat upright. He stared intently at the wall, and then he spoke. You know, I do recall something unusual about that luncheon that I never mentioned to you. It's probably not important, but I'll mention it anyway. While we were eating, a man at an adjacent table caught my attention. A very tall man in a brown beret who bore a scar on one cheek. He had strong interest in Madeleine Dupré, or at least that's what I thought. He kept staring at her from the back, and when she left, he appeared to follow her. It's probably nothing. After all, Madeleine Dupré was beautiful. Many men might be tempted to pursue a woman like that. Inspector Lanvin would probably shrug his shoulders at me if I told him this story. He'd say, that's the way of life in Paris. I need to think about this a little more before I talk to the inspector. A strong-willed person, Carol Emerson left the jail resolved to take some independent action on behalf of her husband. She would conduct her own investigation. But first, she had to take care of important business. She spent the rest of Thursday and all day Friday securing the services of a defense counsel for Ted and arranging for her daughter's flight back to Georgia. On Saturday, after saying goodbye to Wendy at Charles de Gaulle Airport, she went immediately by taxi to the floral shop on Boulevard Saint-Germain that Ted had mentioned. She entered the boutique about 11 a.m. After waiting patiently for 2 customers to leave, she spoke to the proprietor, a short, balding man with a prominent mustache. Accustomed to dealing with tourists, the man spoke English quite well. He oozed charm. But when Carol mentioned the name of the deceased woman, his smile gave way to a nervous grin. What can you tell me about Mademoiselle Dupré? Very little. She loved roses. You say loved. Then you know of her death? Well, yes, I read about it in the newspaper. Most unfortunate. A beautiful woman. I understand that you had some business with her. Would you tell me what it concerned? It was nothing important. I do not wish to discuss it. Anyway, I'm closing now. It's time for lunch. But your sign outside says that you close from 12 to 3. It's only 11:10 now. I don't care what the sign says. I'm closing now. You must leave. Noting the man's high level of agitation, Carol wondered about its cause as she complied with his request. The amateur detective crossed the street, hid herself among the bypassers, and waited. Within 5 minutes, the proprietor emerged from the boutique, pulled down the metallic panel that secured the front, and turned the key in the heavy padlock. Then he walked quickly south on Rue Tournon, past Saint-Sulpice Church, to the Jardin du Luxembourg. Carol followed. Hiding behind a tree, she watched the man sit on a bench in an isolated part of the park. After glancing about, the florist removed something from his pocket, perhaps an envelope, Carol thought, and taped it to the bottom of the bench. When the man departed, his pursuer elected to remain with the bench. Tempted to take immediate possession of the object, she rejected the impulse, reasoning that someone would probably retrieve it soon. Within minutes, a tall man in a brown beret sauntered casually up a gravelly path. Deftly and almost imperceptibly, he removed the object, placed it in his pocket, and walked in the direction of the Seine. Carol's heart beat strongly as she followed. A cool breeze helped to calm her. At the Odeon station, the man descended the stairway to the metro. Having used the subway in previous days, Carol was fortunate to have the necessary tokens. Upon boarding the train, she took a position near the exit farthest from the man she pursued. He was tall, so it was easy to spot his brown beret above the other passengers. She got off when it did at the Barbe Rocher station. Disoriented at first, she happily recognized a gleaming white structure that she had seen in the paintings of Utrillo. It was the Sacré-Cœur Cathedral, which she knew to be located in the heart part of Paris known as Montmartre. Trying to avoid detection, Carol kept some distance between herself and her quarry. But turning the corner of a short, sinuous street, she discovered that she had lost him. Apparently, he had entered one of the numerous apartment buildings in the vicinity. Carol was angry at herself for letting him get away. What could she do now? Encountering a sidewalk cafe, she sat down to think. While sipping a soda, she decided that the man probably inhabited Montmartre. This was his neighborhood. People around here must know him. She called the waiter and tried her college French. Excuse me, but I'm looking for a friend of mine. I wonder if you've seen him. He's rather tall and he always wears a brown beret. Ah, of course, you mean Monsieur Raymond. Yes, he was supposed to meet me here, but he's half an hour late. I know he lives somewhere nearby. Would you be able to tell me just where? No, madame, I'm sorry, but I cannot. He's a very good customer of this cafe, so his residence must be close. Uncertain what to do next, Carol decided to return to her hotel. She would inform Ted, and if he agreed, the police, of all that had transpired. The police would surely find Monsieur Raymond with ease. Perhaps his capture would resolve the case and free her husband. After paying the bill, Carol hailed a passing taxi and left the scene. Half an hour later, Monsieur Raymond sat down at the same table that the American woman had recently vacated. With a grin on his face, the waiter gently reproved his good customer. Monsieur Raymond, you shouldn't stand up lovely ladies. What do you mean? The lovely blonde American woman you were supposed to meet here an hour ago. Did she say her name? No, but she asked where you live. I couldn't reply because I don't know. Rest assured that if I had known, I certainly would have sent her to you. Well, thank you. Do you know where she went? She caught a taxi. I heard her tell the driver Hotel Cluny. In mid-afternoon on Saturday, Carol visited Ted in jail. Her husband had just concluded a first meeting with the defense counsel. According to Ted, the lawyer had sounded optimistic that the case against him would be dropped for lack of a motive and for other irregularities, despite some damning circumstantial evidence. Carol informed Ted about her visit to the floral shop and the subsequent events that had led her to Montmartre. But the couple could not agree on sharing this information with the police. The longer they talked, the more Carol resisted the idea of confiding in the police. They already distrust us. You told them that Wendy and I had been kidnapped. That turned out not to be true. Now, if I tell them a tale about a strange man with a scar on his face and a secret message taped to a bench in the park, you think they're going to believe me? Give me a little more time to snoop around. When we have incontrovertible proof, we'll give it to them. Carol left the jail with the issue unresolved. Minutes before she reached her hotel, Monsieur Raymond inquired at its reception desk about a blonde American woman. Upon learning that Mrs. Carol Emerson and her husband Theodore were guests, the Frenchman told the clerk that he would await her return, and he offered a reward for identifying her without revealing his presence. Unaware of the danger, Carol entered the hotel, picked up her room key, and walked to the elevator. At that moment, Raymond stepped behind her, pressed a gun to her back, and ordered her to accompany him without saying a word to anyone. 1 hour later, Ted was embracing his attorney and thanking him for having secured his release from jail. However, Inspector Lanvin refused to return the American's passport and instructed him not to leave Paris without permission. Disappointed that he and his family could not make their scheduled flight home, Ted nevertheless was elated to be free. he rushed to the Hotel Cluny to tell Carol the good news. 45 minutes later, the freed prisoner was back at the jail with an incredible story. Just as the inspector was preparing to leave his office for the day, Ted burst in, shouting excitedly, "My wife's been kidnapped!" "Monsieur, are you playing a game with us? A few days ago, you reported to us that your wife had been kidnapped. Then she came in person to disprove your story. Now you tell us again that she's been kidnapped?" "Really, my wife has been kidnapped." "How do you know this?" Ted explained that upon release from jail, he had gone directly to his hotel. Failing to find his wife in their room, he had learned from the desk clerk that she had left the hotel in the company of a tall man in a brown beret. Ted then related Carol's report of her experiences earlier in the day. Lanvin was skeptical. "Monsieur, what do you expect me to do? Tomorrow is Sunday, my day of rest. I have plans to take my family to Normandy." "Well, aren't you at least going to send some men to search Montmartre for the man in the beret?" We can't tear apart all of Montmartre just on the chance that your wife might be there. We don't actually know that a kidnapping has occurred. The clerk said that your wife left the hotel in the company of the man with the beret. Perhaps she left voluntarily. Some foreign women find Frenchmen irresistible. I'll tell you what I'll do. Monday morning, I'll bring the florist in for questioning. But in the meantime, there's little we can do. Exasperated, Ted left the station in a mental whirlwind. To him, time was of the essence. Carol's life was in danger. But without the assistance of the police, what could he do? A few minutes of reflection on the sidewalk led to this conclusion. If Carol could learn the man's name easily at a cafe in Montmartre, he too should be able to gather information, especially since he already knew the man's name. The sole impediment was that he didn't speak French. Ted tried to remember in detail the story his wife had told. He took the metro to the Barbe Rocher station. On the street, he asked bypassers, "Sacré-Cœur?" When a couple pointed toward the cathedral, he began to walk in that direction. Blocks later, his question became, "Café?" At the first establishment of that kind, he showed waiters a photo of Carol. None recognized her. Then he attempted to describe the man in the beret. This proved equally unsuccessful. 2 streets away, he scored a hit. The waiter to whom he spoke identified Monsieur Raymond. Pressing the man further, Ted learned that Monsieur Raymond lived at Rue Houdon. Though ending at Place Pigalle, famous for its bright light cabarets and prostitutes, Rue Houdon itself was a shadowy street that harbored shadowy people. Ted asked one bypasser after another about Monsieur Raymond, but all ignored him or shrugged their shoulders. After half an hour of fruitless endeavor, he suddenly spotted the man himself. Ted followed. When the beret disappeared into an apartment building, the American entered too. On the 4th floor, the Frenchman opened a door. From behind, Ted pushed him and burst into the room, yelling his wife's name. In an adjacent room, Carol began to scream in reply. The door to that chamber opened suddenly, and through it came Carol, pursued by another man. At once, this man and Raymond joined forces to attack the American. Fighting back, Ted shouted for his wife to escape and get help. Before they beat him unconscious, he managed to hold off his attackers long enough to enable Carol to flee. Unable to find any policeman quickly, Carol got a taxi and rushed to the prefecture of police. Inspector Lanvin, at home after an exhausting day of work on the Dupré murder case, was just about to enjoy his favorite meal of cardin à l'orange when he received a call from the station. A foreign woman was demanding immediate attention for a crime involving her husband. She claimed that his life was in danger. The lawman reluctantly postponed his dinner and drove at once to the station. But upon seeing the foreign woman, he slapped his bald head and uttered a loud, "Mon Dieu!" And when she said, "They've kidnapped my husband," he rolled his eyes and slumped into a chair. After a brief moment, he suddenly leaped to his feet, screaming, "Do you know, madam, that in a whole year in Paris, there are not more than 3 kidnappings? Yet you expect me to believe that your family has had 3 kidnappings in 3 days?" Tearfully, Carol blurted out her story. Seeing the tears, the inspector softened. Something must have happened. No one could fake tears like that. He called for some men and placed Carol in a car with him. Soon they were racing through Paris with sirens blaring. In the building on Rue Houdon, Carol led the police to the rooms where she had been held captive. Not only were the rooms vacant, there was scarcely a trace of human presence. The closets and drawers were all empty. The concierge said that the apartment had been rented to a Monsieur Largeau. Inspector Lanvin asked Carol if she could be mistaken about the apartment. When she insisted that this was the correct one, the policeman turned a skeptical eye on her. "You tell me your husband was kidnapped. When we come here, no one is here. You say the kidnapper is a Monsieur Raymond. The concierge says she rented to a Monsieur Largeau. Tell me, madam, if you were in my place, what would you believe?" Carol could see that it was useless to pursue the matter any further with the police. This was the classic tale of the boy who cried wolf. That night, the American woman could not sleep. She missed Ted terribly and feared for his safety. How could she get him back? Mentally, she reviewed the details of her own kidnapping by the man in the beret. She had learned that his first name was Georges, and that the other man, the one who kept threatening to burn her with cigarettes, was named René. She reasoned that if Georges had followed Madeleine Dupré from the cafe, then René must have followed Ted to their hotel and phoned him later. But when she was their captive, why did they interrogate her? What had they expected to learn? What was it that they suspected Madeleine Dupré had given to her? And who was this Oscar that they mentioned? In the morning, Carol went down to the Cluny Café. Noting her depression, the Brazilian waiter tried to comfort her. As she left the cafe, he asked Madame Pinon, the concierge, to look after her. This was the woman in whose care the Americans had placed their daughter for a day. "How is your beautiful little girl?" inquired Madame Pinon. "Did you send her to America as you planned?" "Yes, I spoke to her by phone yesterday. She's doing fine." "I love that blue jacket of hers. Did she take it with her?" Why, yes. I hope we didn't forget to send everything with her." "Will you return to America soon?" Although the near future was highly uncertain, Carol replied with a simple yes. She was weary of this chit-chat, and she had no intention of relating the incredible events of recent days. As they spoke, a voice over an intercom system in the hotel paged Mrs. Emerson. At the reception desk, she took a call from the police station. Without any explanation, a gendarme requested simply that she report to the station on an urgent matter. Carol feared for the worst. All the way to the prefecture, Carol pleaded with God to spare her husband. From the inspector, she discovered that there's no limit to the number of surprises that one may experience during April in Paris. About 6 this morning, an anonymous person summoned police to an apartment in Montrouge near the Cité Universitaire. There, some of our men found Monsieur Emerson unconscious beside the dead body of a florist. I see you open your mouth in wonder, but it's true. Your husband seems to like dead bodies. Monsieur Emerson has sustained numerous bruises, but no broken bones. We sent him to a hospital under guard. Now, once again, we have to consider whether he is a candidate for the guillotine. Frankly, madam, never in my life have I met such a family. Everywhere the Emersons go, there is trouble. At first, I thought you were innocent tourists, but now you seem to be involved in everything. Do you have the diamonds? Carol didn't know how to respond. What did diamonds have to do with her and Ted? Instead of answering the lawman's question, she asked one of her own. Are you blaming my husband for the death of the florist? Probably not. That's another crazy thing. Your husband keeps turning up beside dead bodies, but he doesn't seem to be the murderer. In this case, the victim was strangled. The killer was a right-handed person. You should thank God that your husband is left-handed. Discharged from the hospital, Ted was transported to the prefecture for a reunion with his wife. However, Inspector Lanvin would not release the couple at once. He wanted to talk about diamonds. He explained that 10 days earlier, 6 diamonds valued at $5 million had been stolen from a diamond center in Tel Aviv, Israel. We now know that they were shipped in floral arrangements to the Belle Rose boutique in Paris, where the proprietor, Monsieur Buffon, passed them on to Madeleine Dupré. She, in turn, was supposed to send them to Amsterdam, but apparently the mademoiselle and a boyfriend named Oscar had other plans. They intended to take the diamonds to America. Naturally, the Israelis were anxious to recover their missing jewels. Instead of relying exclusively on Interpol to do the work, they hired French gangsters. Georges Raymond, the man in the brown beret, was one of them. Quite likely he killed Madeleine Dupré and possibly Monsieur Buffon as well. Before, I thought you Emersons were just innocent victims of other people. It made sense to me that Raymond, overhearing your conversation with Mademoiselle Dupré, saw an opportunity to frame you for the murder he was about to commit. But both of you keep coming in and out of every phase of this investigation. I must wonder if this is all by chance or if you are deeply involved in wrongdoing yourselves. The inspector then questioned the pair at length about the diamonds. The hapless Emersons insisted that they knew nothing. Lanvin asked if they might have received the gems unwittingly. Ted and Carol dismissed that suggestion as highly improbable. Having exhausted all topics relevant to the diamonds, the inspector asked the couple to sign a record of their interview. Bidding them farewell, Lanvin recommended that they return to America at once before Paris was depleted of all its citizenry. On the plane to Atlanta, the Emersons reminisced about their French adventure. It clearly was not the April in Paris that we had anticipated, said Carol. But nevertheless, it ranked high for excitement. We have stories to tell for a lifetime. And I have a beautiful new dress. Ted smiled. Yeah, he agreed. That was an unbelievable adventure. All those twists and turns. The unfortunate part of it is we'll never know the end of the tale. For the rest of our lives, we'll wonder who really killed Mademoiselle Dupré and the florist, and their motive, and why we were singled out for involvement, and whether anyone was punished for the crimes. Carol sighed, and then she added, Don't forget about those diamonds. From Hartsfield Airport, the pair went by taxi to the home of Carol's mother. There, Wendy and Grandma became the first people to hear the fabulous story. After a 2-day visit, the Emerson family caught a bus to Macon. Unlocking the front door of their home, Ted exclaimed, "Man, does it feel good to be home." With 2 suitcases in hand, he stepped through the entrance and immediately noticed something amiss. A framed photo that had stood on a small table was lying on the floor. Dismissing the discovery as an insignificant matter, Ted joked, "It appears the mice have been active during our absence." But by the time Carol and Wendy had deposited their baggage on the living room floor, he knew the discovery was significant. An overturned wastebasket in another part of the room convinced him that intruders had been at work. A quick search of the house yielded clues of a peculiar incursion. Some rooms were untouched. It appeared that the culprits had explored only closets and drawers, as though seeking something in particular. But nothing seemed to be missing. At breakfast the following morning, the Emersons discussed the burglary. Ted said, "You know, we were lucky. The perpetrators could have taken our jewelry, our computers, or our television sets, but they didn't. I wonder what they were after." A policeman said he was unsure whether there had been one or more perpetrators, and he had no clues to their identity. Apparently, we lost nothing of value. So it's no big deal, especially after all that happened to us in Paris. By now, we can handle anything. Right, honey? Carol wasn't so confident. "I don't know, Ted. Our experiences in Paris kind of aroused me from slumber. They demonstrated just how vulnerable we are and how unprepared to defend ourselves. I've been thinking that perhaps we should buy a handgun." "Oh, you aren't serious, are you? We live in a peaceful neighborhood and we've never had any trouble before." "Well, I am serious. Just because we haven't had trouble in the past is no guarantee that we won't have trouble in the future. Paris scared me." "Well, I can understand your concern, but I don't want any weapons around the house. You hear in the news often about children shooting themselves or others with their parents' firearms. You don't want Wendy shooting herself, do you?" "Of course not." "Well then, how about buying some pepper spray?" "Oh, I guess that's okay." "All right then, I'll buy some tomorrow." In the evening, 3 days later, while the family was watching television in the family room, the front doorbell rang. Opening the door, Ted was shocked to find himself face to face with Georges Raymond, armed with a gun. The intruder forced the entire family into Wendy's bedroom, where he asked to see the girl's blue jacket. With the garment in his hand, he withdrew a knife from a pocket and cut open a seam. Out fell 6 diamonds. While he gazed in admiration of their beauty, Carol took the pepper spray from her purse and squirted him in the face. Caught by surprise, Raymond dropped the gun. Ted quickly grabbed it. Within 30 minutes, Atlanta police had Georges Raymond handcuffed and under arrest. Before going to bed, Carol wrote a letter to Inspector Lanvin. In view of what had happened this evening, she had important information for the lawman. She remembered that an employee of the Cluny Hotel had addressed the nice Brazilian waiter as Oscar. Furthermore, the concierge, who had taken care of Wendy for a day, was the only person outside their family who could have sewn the diamonds into the seam of their daughter's jacket. The following morning, Carol and Ted were standing on their front porch, coffee cups in hand, talking about their incredible adventure. The next day, they would return to their usual jobs. No more April in Paris. The two of them sighed in concert. At that moment, the mailman came to the door. Among the correspondence was a large envelope from the Home Enterprises Corporation. Carol opened it nonchalantly. A letter began with the following words: "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Emerson. You are our grand prize winners. There's nothing you have to do or buy. Be prepared to spend all next April in Paris. End of story. So have I dimmed your desire to experience April in Paris? I hope not. Paris in the spring is certainly charming. I speak from experience. Long ago, I lived there while studying at the Sorbonne University. For local people, April in Paris is something special too. It marks the end of a lengthy winter plagued by gloomy, overcast skies. For next May 1st, I have planned a cheerful, uplifting story entitled Conversations with a Sunflower. Stay well. Thanks for watching Dramas, Dreams, and Drollery.